Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 296. Today we're going to talk about Warlock. This is a very funky game from Quined Games. Plays 3 to 5 players, about an hour. What is this? I'm curious what this is. 60 minutes? I seem to have games go over an hour. I cannot seem to get this to go under the hour mark, but I'll talk about more of that in the review. So this is a card game, and you're building like a fantasy kingdom. If you look here on the box cover, you've got different races, goblins and wizards and all kinds of good stuff there. So you're using cards, each player to build up an empire of cities, and a lot of the cards have different special abilities and things. So let's go and jump into how it works, and I'll tell you what I think of it. Okay, there's a few things to look at here. Everybody has a player board. There's 5 of those in the game. And you have a castle, a dungeon, and a mine in the player board. There's also the main board here, Hubba's Bar. Think of this like a tavern. And here you're going to have your draw deck of cards. And you'll be playing cards to here and here. So I'll explain. So first player is going to get the start player card, and then the last player of the current round is going to get the auction card. There'll be an auction phase that happens after 3 rounds of play. So the game is going to end either after 3 days. So each day is made up of 3 rounds. So after 9 rounds, or once somebody completes their empire, which I'll show you what that means in a second. So players are going to start with drawing 5 cards at the beginning of each day. So we're going to take the 5 cards here. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take 2 cards. You're going to take 1 card and put it here in the bar. And then you choose to put another card here in the dungeon or in the mine. So if you put it in the mine, you're going to put it face down. So you can see that's the gold amount, so that'll give you 3. This will give you 2 or a half, which is interesting. I'll explain that more in a second. And then 3 here. So let's say I'll take and put this guy down here, face down for 3. I could, if I wanted, put him in the dungeon as well. The reason you put him in the mine is you're actually going to have an auction for these cards that build up here. So let's say we're just playing, I don't know, a 3-player game. And so each of the other 2 players will have put in cards here. And now if everybody's put a card in the bar and then 1 in either the dungeon or mine, then we have 3 rounds of actions. Well, the actions you can do in your turn is the first action is you can simply draw a card, add it to your hand. The second action could be to put a card in the mine again. Or you could also put a guy in the dungeon there. You could put a guy in the castle, and when you put it in the castle, it's going to do a special ability. Now, the special abilities aren't indicated on the card, but they are here indicated on the player aid. You can see there's 3 player aids that the players will want to make reference to. Now, the last thing you can do is to actually build it in your empire there. And what you're trying to do is build a 4x4 grid here. So as I build guys out, I've got to either build it adjacent to my board or adjacent to a pre-existing card there. And I just realized I have this board flipped over. So you want to actually have the board flipped the other way, because I didn't notice that. Because this gives you your zones there. You can see there's 4 zones, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry about that. And so you want to build these. You have a 4x4 grid, and that's one of the ways that the game will end. If somebody builds the 4x4 grid, that will end the game. So again, you can draw a card, put a guy in the mine, put a guy in the dungeon, or put a guy in the castle. Now, when you put in the castle, again, you activate the special ability. When you put it in the dungeon, you're basically looking at the type of guy it is. And so to play a particular guy out into the empire, you can see the resource cost there in the lower left-hand corner. So this would require a wizard. So here, if we had a wizard, put the wizard there. And so if I wanted to play him, I would have to pay the wizard out of my dungeon as a cost for him. So the cards do a lot of different things. I mean, you've got them for money, which you're going to have an auction here I'll talk about in a second. You've got them just for kind of like their race. They provide a certain type of resource based on their race. And then you have the special abilities here, and of course they can be out here in the empire. Now in the empire, they're going to be worth victory points there, so that's 1 victory point. And the humans have an interesting way of doing victory points. You want to kind of build a chain of humans here. You can see they have a little question mark there. So if I build a big chain of humans, there's 2 more, then the points are actually going to go up, and all that's indicated here on this player aid. There's a couple of rules for building here. You can see these inner spots here to the empire, you can't have any giants there. So like this giant right there, he's not going to be worth any points, but this one will be. And then the wizards, you can't have them here on these outer edges as well. and then you just add up all the points you can see on there, and then here's the chain for the human. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we had a chain of 4, it would be 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9. You can see how it goes up. So you want to build a network of those, and then for each different type, if you have 3 different types of races in there, you get a point all the way up to, if you have 6 different types, all of them, you get 8. And then you have, if you have the most giants and wizards, you get 6, and then most of these are these, you get 4, and the most of the goblins and gnomes, you get 2. So there's a few ways to score points there at the end of the game. So actually, after we played 3 actions, we're going to draw 5 cards again, and again we're going to put 1 card in our player board and then 1 here in the bar, and so then we'll do 3 more actions, and then we'll have another round, and we'll just put these out here randomly. And so in this case there's a 3-player game, so this would be a 3x3. If it was a 4-player game, it would be a 4x4. And then whoever reveals the most money here is going to get first choice. But the way it works is you actually total up your money, and the player who goes first, who has the auction card, gets to kind of declare an amount. So if he declares, let's say, $6, then nobody else can declare 6. They have to declare less or more. And that's where the half a buck comes in. Because you may want to declare, okay, well, I'm just going to, be $0.50 difference, so I maybe be at 5.5. And then you take 1 card out of here and actually build it for free over here, and then you discard the other. And then the other player will do the same. They'll build 1 and discard. Then the other player will do 1 and he'll build and discard. And then there should be 1 left over for each kind. And then you can take 1 card and put it in the mine or dungeon, and that should eat up all the cards. Now, if you didn't have any gold or anything, you don't get to participate. So you want to put at least some gold in there, hopefully. So you do that. That'll be 1 day, and then you do 3 more rounds. Again, this will start to fill up. 3 actions per day. Or per round, excuse me, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the game is going to win based on all this stuff here. So let's talk about some of the different special abilities here. And the special abilities are going to come into play once you play a particular race there in the castle. And I should say that each of the races really has 2 special abilities. They have an ability in the castle, but then they also have kind of a trait that usually interacts with how you deal with the empire building. So the goblin special ability is you can actually take a card here, if it was over in the bar, and then pay for that and then build that immediately by playing the goblin. So you can build cards that were placed in the inn that way. Now the other special abilities, you can maybe barely see that little gnome there, and if you look here you can see him there with a human. And this ability is when you put the goblin here in the dungeon, you can use either the goblin to pay for the construction or the human in this case. So remember this one here, this costs 2 humans there to build that. So the goblin can count as either a goblin or a human if he's here in your dungeon, which is pretty cool. The wizard, if you play him, you can actually swap one of your city buildings here in your empire with somebody else's. And if he's down here in the dungeon, he actually counts as any resource type there. Oh, and I should say some of these have here, you can see there's this little, let's see if it'll focus. These little jokers, that means they can be paid for with anything as well. So that's the wizard. And the giant here, we place him, when we use him here in the castle, we can actually put a dragon out. And you can see here there's a stack of these dragon cards. There's also a stack of these ruin cards here. So when you put a dragon out, let's put him here like so. Let's say that was there. So the dragon actually protects anything adjacent to it. So if we put out these little humans here, let's say we're doing a chain of humans, he's actually going to protect, not this one, it's diagonal, but anything orthogonal from being swapped, like the wizard would swap it. Now, when you build a giant city, if you build him out here, he actually will trigger a swap as well, similar to the wizard. You can swap too, but the dragon actually protects those. You can't legally swap those out. They also here have these orcs, and when you play these, then you can destroy an opponent's city there and turn it into ruins. You can build back over those, of course, but you can't do it if it's protected by the dragon. The gnomes are interesting because you can play these out here for free. Now if you play them here in the castle for the special ability, you can play a card that you want into your empire for free as long as it's worth less than 2 victory points. So that is pretty much how you play the game. Basically, play 3 rounds, draw some more cards, play some, try to get the different special effects, try to kind of time your special abilities and things like that. So let's go back to my talking head. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview. I will say this is a game that has kind of grown on me. It has an interesting, weird pace to the game. You have, you get your 5 cards to start the game, and then you put 1 at the inn, and then 1 in your little player area as the mine or the dungeon. Then you play a couple of 3 action rounds, draw 5 more cards, and you kind of do the same thing. And so your options kind of start off very, very small. There's not a lot to do. And I almost feel like I wish they just gave you like 10 cards or something to start the game, or 7. Just so you had some more options to start doing stuff earlier. However, I don't think so. I think it's just, when you first played it, it's like, God, this is really awkward and weird. But then you start to get into it and like, okay, now I've got a lot more options as the game sort of evolves. And then the next time you play, you're like, okay, now I understand the game, and now I can kind of see I don't really need to worry so much about sort of getting ahead of anybody too much early in the game. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind with this game. It can be very, very nasty. You've got the orcs there that will destroy cities, and also the giants and the wizards will swap stuff out, and you're like, what? I was just building my little chain of humans, and you jacked it up. So you want to make use of the dragons early on. And I'm just remembering, I don't think I mentioned in the walkthrough that you can build on top of the dragons. I did mention you can build on top of the ruins, but you can also build on top of the dragons. So it's interesting because you kind of get a lot of dragons out, and people are sort of, being very conservative and protective. At least my group seems to play that way. And I think you should play that way, because the orcs can just destroy you and make you basically have wasted, maybe 1 or more turns, building up your dungeon and then getting the guy out. It could be very wasteful. So anyway, you get out a lot of dragons, and then as the game progresses into that 3rd day, then you start, getting stuff out and, playing, cards on top of that to get you more points, because the dragons aren't giving you any points, and the ruins certainly aren't giving you any points. But dragons are kind of a nice defensive mechanism, sort of as you're building your empire, to be flying around and protecting your city. So the really cool thing about this game, though, is all of the special abilities. Like, I love how the humans work. You play the humans, you draw 3 cards. If you play them in the castle, and you build up a little chain of them. And then they have that weird sort of ability where they can be worth 2 gold or half a gold, just so you can, split the difference either way to be able to choose. And, the goblins with their dual resources, they can be a goblin and something else, or both, or whatever. So the way that the things operate is very interesting. There's a lot of cool hand management here, based on some of the restrictions as well, like where you put the giants out. And it's a really oddball game, though. It's one that I'm definitely recommending to people, but you got to give it at least 2 or 3 plays to kind of really get into the timing and, when things are going to happen and what you can do to protect yourself, or you maybe will even bluff out a little bit. So you put this out there and they're like, oh, well, I'm going to play the orc and I'm going to destroy that one. You're like, okay, well, that's fine, because now I'm going to come back and build up, the thing I really wanted to build here. And now they've spent all their time, building up the resources in the dungeon to get the orc out. And, they're not going to necessarily try to do that again against you. So the game does seem to take more than an hour, though, like I said. It's relatively AP inducing, because there's a lot going on, with the cards. And one thing I wish they could have done was do some kind of iconography on the cards for the special abilities. They do give you the player aid, but a lot of times you'll just be kind of like, okay, what does it do? Okay, yeah, okay, this does that, this does that. Now you do pick it up relatively quickly, but it makes the game that much harder to teach. It's like, they're like, what does the human do? Well, look on the player aid, It's not that big a deal, but I wish they could have done some iconography or something. But on the other hand, I kind of like how, like, the goblins worked, where it's like, oh, the goblin's in the picture with the other guy. So the art itself, instead of just pure icons, it's like the art itself tells you what it does. I wish they could have pushed that a little bit more on that side. It just would make it easier to teach. Once you get the hang of it, it's easy enough to play. So definitely take a look at it. I think you can only get this directly from the Quined Games website. So I could be wrong about that, but I think that's the only spot you can get it. So a very interesting game. It feels sort of old school in some ways, maybe like 10 years ago. But the art's really interesting and neat. It's funky. you know, it's got a cool, very different kind of gameplay. So if you are looking for something different, and that's the thing with this, it's very different and unique. I would say definitely take a look at this. If you just want the same old Euro, the same old thing, you know, whatever, this fits a nice straddle where the theme actually does kind of come across a little bit in terms of what the special abilities are of the different characters and cards and stuff. But definitely take a look at Warlock. Thanks.